Hey, welcome back to the Ready State. It is Kelly's DMs, where I DM myself cool stuff on the internet. Well, take a look. Today we've got Weili Zhang. She's an MMA fighter, and something I want you to see that I think is gorgeous and amazing and simple. One of the things we're always talking about is when we ultimately reduce down what it is we're doing, we're either accelerating, we're decelerating, or we're doing isometrics. And in the term of corrective exercise or term of restorative position exercise, really I have two choices. I can either slow something down or I can stop. And in this position, what I want you to see about what Ms. Zhang is doing here is that she is in our lunge archetype. And this actually brings up a whole lot of very interesting things to talk about. First and foremost, let me kill the sound here. First and foremost, notice that the knee is actually behind the hip and the torso is upright. She's doing this in a loaded position. She's on the ball of her foot here, and this back foot is straight. And so one of the things that we've got going on here is that the athlete is spending time doing loaded end range isometrics, where she's loading the fascia, she's loading the connective tissue, and she's telling her brain, this is a position that it's important. Notice that with the load, she gets a little bit of better feedback through here. These tissues are very strong, very stiff, and her torso is in this position. Because ultimately, we're looking at her ability to be able to extend this hip powerfully in a longer lever position so that the knee isn't always bent when that hip starts to come into extension to buy space. We're looking for this anterior line of fascia to be very, very loaded and for her to be very comfortable here. Now, you've heard us talk about Franz Bosch and his wonderful book before, and this is actually known a little bit as called a pelvic lock in the strength and conditioning phrase or positions where we have the contralateral leg or the opposite leg is in some end range flexion here or near flexion, and this sets up a position where this leg can be very, very powerful. With this leg come up, and you'll see that this shows up in a lot of sprinting and a lot of batting mechanics. Even our friend Jeff Albert has talked about this position as being really under sort of a root position that's crucial for athletic development. What we see here is that we've got all the toes in contact with the ground, giving her a lot of support and a lot of time here in this position to develop feedback and awareness. And all she's done is grab a couple dumbbells at the end of a training session, up on the ball of her foot here, just to improve balance and awareness, and because that was the place where she's loading. And one of the things that's, I think, is crucial is that as we try to untangle what's necessary and when to do it, this is a wonderful finisher. And let me give you just a little bit different view of it. This is the view from straight on. You can see how she's really working on maintaining the integrity of the foot contact position here. Same position, same loading, torso is upright. This is also from her Instagram. And in this shape, she's working on being able to manage balance, manage breathing, and feel what's going on. When we try to untangle some of the complexity that gets thrown around in the world, one of the things that we've seen, for example, is that Mike Boyle has really been a proponent of let's spend some time in this single leg squat position. And what I suspect is really happening here in this single leg squat position is that we're not necessarily loading that front leg so effectively. We're basically loading a lunge pattern or running shape or a pelvic lock pattern, which is so crucial to running and development of athletic positioning. And so what Mike maybe has figured out inadvertently, because he's brilliant, is that just putting athletes into bilateral positions solely as a way of extending hip and developing power may be an incomplete practice. And I think when he moved that leg into extension and then began to load it in squatting, inadvertently, of course he was getting some flexion on the front leg, but he was end up loading this posterior leg or this back leg in a really powerful and meaningful way. And so if we tear down and look through your sort of movement language, the number of times you actually loaded the hip in extension, what you'll see is that it's not very much time. If we look at all the kettlebell swings and all of the squats and all the power cleans and all the jumping and landing, all the things that you're doing, this hip shape is probably the least loaded and yet probably the most fertile for development of athletic shape and athletic power. And so an easy way to drop this in, particularly in athletes who are like cyclists or runners who maybe have to, cyclists in the first case, are not spending any time in hip extension, and the runners who this is their bread and butter, an easy thing to do before we even start moving, before we start loading, do any other thing in a split position is to spend some time in this long lever shape, loading the fascia, loading the muscles, telling the brain we have to have this position, and look how upright and gorgeous the torso is. So again, the simplicity of throwing in these isometrics as a finisher to develop that power and to reinforce foot going straight when we run. And as you saw from that video, when her foot was straight, this teaches her that when that hip is in extension, that there's a relative internal rotation of the hip, and having full access to her toes, full access to her ankle in this position means that her next step is also going to be straight. So do I think that this falls into a corrective exercise? No, this is just an end range static hold, but see it for what it is, understand how gorgeous it is, and it's no wonder she is such a savage, because if this is the kind of restorative positional competency training, imagine being kicked by that leg. No, thank you.